Hello, Flute Methods again. Today's video is all about the middle register. So before I get kind of into the meat or into the bones of the middle register of the flute, remember first of all we have basically three registers. You get the low, the middle, and the high. We already had a video about the low register. Talked about why it's best to start in the low register. Hopefully you remember all those reasons. You wrote them down. Don't forget you're writing all of this down. This is your notebook. Good notes. Take lots of notes. Before I talk about actually getting into the middle register, I think it's worth stopping to say when, ideally, assuming, we're on our own schedule and we're not driven by what does the band music make the flute players do, but you're actually just saying, when is the most pedagogically appropriate moment to push the students up into the middle register? I am of the opinion that the best thing to do is to keep them in the low register for quite a while and to really develop a very solid concept of sound. But at a bare minimum, what you really want is you want your students to be able to produce notes very consistently throughout the low register and to have some kind of command of getting air to go into the flute, to have, a secure embouchure, to be able to articulate and get notes to respond really quickly. So those are the bare minimal qualifications. I want to take this moment to point out to you that there are band books out there, and I don't know which ones they are. But there are some of them that will actually start students, like on middle D. I know we're not supposed to face palm in this era of the coronavirus, but I got to face palm that. To me, that's like taking a violinist and say, and we're going to start in second position. Why would you do that? You play open strings and then first position, and then when they're really secure with that, then you're like, okay, now let's try second position. The idea that you would start in the middle register where you're starting in part of the harmonic series when you have not secured the fundamental, to me that makes no sense at all. If you see band books that do that to flute players, please run screaming in the opposite direction. Those books are really, I don't know what they're thinking, but that's a terrible idea. So at a bare minimum, you want your flute players, secure and solid in the low register. You're able to produce notes consistently, bringing up the flute and not having to go, to find the right spot, but to remember and to be able to articulate. I didn't articulate that time. So anyway, that's those are kind of the criteria for moving in to the middle register. I'm going to start this. I'm going to take a low D, remember low D, and I'm going to overblow. And so I'm going to start playing the harmonic series. So what you're going to hear is low D, and then an octave above that, and then a fifth above that, and then a fourth above that, and then a major third above that, and then a minor third above that. So that's the harmonic series, and I'm doing this because all of our fingerings on the flute are based on the harmonic series. So I'm starting low. So you heard that. You can really play any low note on the flute and play that harmonic series if you're changing the air with your embouchure. You're able to manipulate the air appropriately. Okay, so what you notice there is the first part of the harmonic series is the octave. So the octave repeats with fingerings too. So I'm going to start on E for reasons that will be evident in a moment. And I'm just going to slowly, I'm going to play the low one, and then I'm going to play the octave above, and you'll notice the fingering doesn't change. So I went to C sharp because that's where the repetition of fingering stops. And then you get into the high register, which will be another video, where we show how the fingerings are based on the fifth and not based on the octave anymore. So I started on E because D and E flat while it's possible to make the middle register speak, that is not technically the correct fingering for those notes. What we have here is the flute doesn't technically have an octave key, but on D and E flat, this index finger on the left hand, it effectively functions as an octave key. So the bad news is you have another fingering to remember, but the good news is those notes are just money. They speak really, really easily because they have their own fingering. So it's not unusual to teach students who can, they have a really hard time getting the airspeed fast enough to get to the E, because D and E flat, you don't really have to blow very hard to get those to come out. And then suddenly you're on E and it wants to drop back down to the low register. So it's a really commonly missed fingering, the low D and the low E flat, middle D and middle E flat. A lot of flute players will just leave their fingers down. They need kind of surveillance in order to make sure they do that. But it does make the note a lot easier to get it to speak. So, so be very aware of that, and you need to make sure your airspeed is really up in order to be able to start the notes that do actually repeat fingerings from the low registers like E, F, F sharp, G, etc. So, so be aware of that. That's the only kind of fingering thingy going on in the middle register. Otherwise, we just repeat fingerings. And I know I say this a lot, but I'll say it again. The easiest thing about playing the flute is putting the right buttons down. The hard part is what you do with your air and how you get the notes to come out. So, and the correct register. So, at a bare minimum, we want to just get the right keys down for the notes. All right, let's see. All right, fingering system, the D and the E flat, we did it. All right, we've kind of talked about this, but I'm just going to throw it out there again just in case. When we're playing, the higher you go, the faster your air gets. There are a couple of different ways we can get air to go faster. You can think smaller inside your mouth, like you're saying kind of ooh, as opposed to oh. If you say oh, think oh, how much space there is in your mouth, and then ooh, the lips come forward and they make that airstream just a little bit smaller. So if I say oh, I have to work a little harder to get that middle note to come out. But if I say ooh, then the air will speed up and I'll get that middle note, that middle register note to speak. So that's one way. The little space here, the aperture, if that's a little bit smaller, that can help you make your airstream a little smaller. Actually, the inside of the mouth is a little easier. What you don't want to do, I'm going to turn to the side for this, is bring your jaw forward. That is the sound of not quite enough air making it into the flute, as opposed to kind of like I'm saying aw, like you just saw a cute baby animal video. Aw, isn't that cute? Aw. So notice my lips are forward, but my jaw is back. Yeah, so then the jaw is a real stabilizer, that no matter what's happening up here in the front of the embouchure, the jaw is back and it's making the air go into the flute. If you get that kind of sound sort of like nothing's really coming out of your flute, it's probably because not enough air is going in. Something you can do is you could take your hand and blow on your hand. You should feel the air down here. If I bring my jaw forward, I feel the air go up my hand. Yeah, that's what it feels like to the flute too. There's just not enough air kind of, oh, here we go. There's not enough air splitting on my little platinum riser. It's just kind of going like that. So that's why you're not getting a really consistent sound. Okay, yeah, we need air to go into the flute. You'll hear me say that about 1,000 more times before this class is over because it's so fundamental. Other instruments, you don't have a choice on where the air goes, but the flute's like, oh, hey, look at all this open space. You know, it's a little tempting to move things around so that there isn't enough air going in. And mostly those problems are solved right here. So I just want to mention just a couple more things before we finish this video. A couple of little maybe things you can think about or visuals. I do not have the opportunity to get props. I could have brought some of my props home from the office, but I did not do that. So, so you remember we had our drinking straw, kind of for the size of the aperture. If you can get a little tinier, like something the size of a coffee stir or like a cocktail straw, it's a nice way to kind of, go back and forth between larger straw, smaller straw, just to give students or give yourself even the opportunity to kind of feel that different sized hole, the different size aperture. The straw, the whole purpose of the straw is it's just a spacer, okay? It's just showing you how large the aperture should be. So that's one thing that you can use that can be really useful for kind of demonstrating what the size of the aperture is. Another thing, I don't have my pinwheel. My pinwheel doesn't work that well anyway, honestly, but especially if maybe I need a smaller pinwheel. But whatever it is, if you blow slow air on a pinwheel, it'll spin sort of slowly, and then if you blow a little faster, the pinwheel will spin faster. So sometimes having that visual, sometimes it's good to hold it kind of below, because that's kind of where we're blowing the air anyway. So having a pinwheel can be like a really useful way to kind of give a visual demonstration to a student on how fast their air is going. They get this visual feedback right away. And plus, it's fun to blow a pinwheel. Who doesn't like to do that? And then I already did the blowing on the hand, and that can be like a real kind of physical manifestation of what's happening with your air. And, with space between the teeth can be a great way to get the jaw to drop. If you say drop the jaw, a lot of students are like, what? But if you say put a space, and again, we're not allowed to put our hands in our mouths because, the virus, but, about the size of your finger between your teeth, suddenly your air is nice and low, and that will help keep the air go in. So those are 3 ways that you could help a student describe to them what needs to happen with your air, because we can't see air, so we have to create kind of visual ways to get those ideas across. All right, so that's the middle register. Good luck with that. We'll talk to you later. Bye.